Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We are the Group 5. I am Izumi Kometa. This is Clavas Shanti. This is Custodio Mary Ann, Coronado Mary Antoinette, and Dadsky Dihan. And today, we will discuss about understanding the concepts, origins, and global context of our topic, the Global South. But before we begin, as you can see, this is our lesson outline, and we will be discussing the definition of the term Global South, the difference between the Global South from the Third World, and we will analyze how a new conception of global relations emerged from the experiences of Latin American countries, and lastly, the world of regions. And at the end of this lesson, you should be able to define the term Global South and explain what it represents, differentiate the Global South from the Third World, and analyze how experiences of Latin American countries shape new ideas about global relations. So now I will begin my discussion. I am Izumi Kameta, the first reporter, and I would be defining the word Global South. If I were to ask you, what do you mean by Global South? Or what comes to your mind when somebody or someone says Global South? You have any idea? So Global South refers to developing countries and regions like Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania. These nations are generally less economically advanced but are rich in culture and resources. So when we say Global South, it is a term used to describe countries that are developing, countries that are still growing. That is Global South. An example of these countries are here. In Asia, we have Philippines, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, while Africa have Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana. Latin America has Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Peru. Oceania has Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Middle East has Iran, Iraq, Yemen, and Jordan. So as you can see, there are many countries that are still developing. There are still many countries that are still growing. So these countries are part of Global South because they share common characteristic or challenges. You can see their common challenges are developing economies, high poverty rates, limited access to education and healthcare, political instability, and economic inequality. So in this slide, I will let you see an examples of their common challenges. So countries in the Global South face many challenges as they work to develop. They are still growing their economies, and many people live in poverty with limited access to jobs, healthcare, and education. While some cities are modern and industrialized, rural areas often remain underdeveloped. Improving infrastructure, education, and healthcare is essential for this nation to reduce poverty and create better opportunities for their people. Now, let's have a quick discussion of the difference between Global South and Global North. So, the difference between Global South, when we say Global South, it refers to countries that are still developing, countries that are poor in technologies, nations that have lower income, less industrialized, and have limited access to healthcare, education, and technologies. And also, in Global South, many countries were colonized, which affects the economic and political development. While in Global North refers to developed and highly industrialized countries such as the United States, Japan, Germany, Canada, and those in Europe. These nations have stronger economies, higher living standards, advanced technology, and greater influence in global politics and trades. So to make it easy, Global South is a term used to describe developing countries, while Global North is a term used to describe countries that are highly developed, that countries that are rich. So in this slide, as you can see the picture, we can really differentiate between the Global North and the Global South. As you can see on my right right side, you can see that, or you can differentiate that as the Global South, while the other one is the Global North. If you ask why, as you can see, the buildings in the Global South, in the Global North, are very high. Technologies are very fast, are very advanced. While in the Global South, there are so many countries that are still developing and growing. So now, back to our topic, the Global South. The countries in Global South often have colonial history, where they were once controlled or exploited by many powerful nations, which affected their development and independence. Because of this, many Global South nations will face social, political, and economic struggles, such as unemployment, weak infrastructure, and limited access to quality education and healthcare. So, daghan kay countries sa Global South nga na-colonized by more powerful nations. When we say colonize or colonization, it is a powerful country that takes control of another country or territory. So a powerful country nga ga control or nagtake og kanang na-power into that certain country. That is colonize. And during sa time na na-colonize ang country sa Global South, kaya ang colonizer or ang mga nag-control is ipangkuha nila ang resources and sila ang gatay control sa economies and governments, which is ang reason nga nung pobre or low ang growth sa kana nga specific na country. And even after nakagain na sila sa independence to that certain country nga na-control nila, they still face problems like unemployment, poor roads and buildings, and limited access to schools and healthcare. So, the history of colonization has left a lasting impact on their development. So, grabe gid ang impact to that rich country nga nag-colonize nila nga they are still, until now, sige gyapon sila grow, sige gyapon sila develop silang country. So, moving forward, economically speaking, countries in the Global South often rely on exports, labor, and foreign investments to support their economies. They face economic inequality both within their borders and in comparison to wealthier countries in the Global North. So, economically, most countries sa Global South kay depend sila on selling products and natural resources sa lain countries, mao na ang gitawag nga exporting. Ginabaligya nila ilahang mga products and natural resources sa lain country para na sila kwarta sa ilahang pag-improve sa pag-build nila silang country. And they also rely on foreign investments, which means money coming from businesses or governments of richer countries to help build factories, companies, or infrastructures. And many people in the Global South work in low-paying jobs or labor industry, which makes it hard to raise their income levels. Ang example ani kay Nigeria, nagdepend sila sa oil exports, while ang Philippines ug ang India ka nagbenefit sila from outsourcing. So that's all for my report, and we will be moving to the next reporter.
So as we move on to the difference between the third world and the global south, we must first understand the term third world. So the third world is an outdated and often offensive term that originally referred to nations not aligned with the United States or the First World, or the Soviet Union, also known as the Second World during the Cold War. So, this term, First World, Second World, and Third World, were term used during the Cold War. So, what happened during the Cold War? So, it is about colonialism between the First World and the Second World, which affected the Third World on which to rely or which to depend. So, this just a brief explanation on what happened in the Cold War. So, while its original meaning was political, the term is now commonly used to describe economically underdeveloped or developing countries, particularly those in Africa, Asia, Latin America, which face highly poverty and economic instability. So, who are these countries that belong to the third world? So, these are the countries that are dependent or highly dependent to other countries. They just wait for support or exports. And these are also the countries that are overpopulated and had widespread poverty, unemployment, and weak leadership. So this is how you define a country that belong to the third world. So as you move on, the global south. So the global south is term used to describe a group of countries with common socio-economic and political characteristics, particularly lower income levels and histories of colonialism, not a, not a strictly geographic region. So it does not define a specific geographic region. So only those are countries that are dependent, but it includes many countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, which often face challenges like poverty, limited access to education and healthcare, and less developed infrastructure. Despite these issues, these nations possess significant populations, natural resources, and vibrant cultures, and are increasingly acting as independent players in global affairs. So even though the countries of the global south is developing countries, but they still have their own way of uh, shining. Um, I, okay, so they have their own way to give a spark to other countries. So now, as we dig deeper, so what really is the difference between global south and the third world? So the third world is an outdated political and economic term. So when we say outdated, it's like the past. So there's a new term for the third world. So this emerged from the Cold War era, designed for nations that are not aligned with the U.S. and Soviet lead or the Second World. So this uh these three terms were merged or emerged to identify which are those countries who are more developed, and underdeveloped. So, on the other hand, the Global South refers to a more recent term that emerged as a replacement for the third world and developing countries. So, it has been said here, it is the replacement of the third world. So, without the third world, there is no Global South. So, rather differences, it is rather similarities. But the only difference between the third world and the global south is the third world has been termed um, in the past, or rather outdated term for global south. So when we say global south, these are the countries that belong to the south, but not strictly only those countries that are underdeveloped. So as you can see, there's similarities. There's a big similarities between the two. So who changed the term third world into global south? So it was changed by Carl Oglesby, an activist writer. He changed the term third world from global south during 1969. So when we say global south, it is describe a group of countries with shared challenge and potential. So these countries merge in order to help each other into the challenges because they have the same challenges and potential. So the difference between them is that when we say the third world, this is the countries that are underdeveloped. So if that country is underdeveloped, then it belongs to the third world. So when we say global south, this is the countries that belong to the global south who are poor and underdeveloped. So to sum it all up, the third world is just when we say older term for global south, but it does have their similarities, but also their differences at the same time. So I hope that you learned what really is the difference between global south and the third world. So I'm gonna say it again. So the third world is the outdated, or it has been termed during the Cold War era to design or for nations that are, or to label them as underdeveloped countries. So, and now it has been improvised and replaced um, with the term global south. So that is the difference between global south and the third world.
Good day, everyone. Now we're diving into a topic that has profoundly shaped sa modern world and particularly sa trajectory of the entire continent. So the topic is the analysis of globalization's impact in Latin America. So our objective here is to understand or analyze how new conception of global relations is emerging from the experiences of Latin American countries. So let's know first what is Latin America. So Latin America refers to countries colonized mainly by the Spaniards, and some part of it is colonized by the Portuguese in the Americas, generally understood to include the entire continent of South America, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean islands, whose inhabitants speak Romance languages like Spanish, Portuguese, and French. It is crucial to remember that kung moingon tag Latin America, we refer to the diverse nation nga gisakop sa Spaniards and sa Portuguese in the American continent, each with its own rich history and culture. So the process of globalization in Latin America really took hold in the 1970s. At first, daghan ang Mauricis kay they are very nationalistic and proud sa ilang kaugalingong identity. Maong dili sila dayon open sa mga social o economic changes gikan sa laing nasod or continent. Pero over time, bisan pa man daghan ang Mauricis, dili na mapugngan ang pag-move o pag-uswag sa globalization. Maunang ni-open na sila sa global trade o economic integration nga maoy nakapag-usab sa ilang political, economic, and cultural system. So, how globalization affected Latin America? So, there is a positive and negative effect. Sa positive effects, globalization expanded trade and foreign investment, growth in production and labor markets, and improvements in demographic conditions. So, ang globalization nagdala og daghang positive effects sa Latin America. Una, naka-boost siya sa trade o production, nag-open of new market o nakatabang sa population growth, development sa uban nga lugar. So, kani nga mga butang, naghatag og hope sa economic progress o maayo nga integration sa global economy. In short, globalization brought opportunities for growth and connection to the world. Pero di po nato kalimtan nga daghan pod negative effects ang globalization. Una ani ang social division and inequality between communities, increased transnational and cross-border migration. So, sa pag-increase sa migration, nitaas pod ang migration problems pareha sa pagbalhin sa mga tawog gikan sa rural padung sa urban areas og mga border issues. Rapid rural to urban migration causing overcrowding. Infrastructural defects in housing, health, and transportation. Daghan gihapon ang infrastructural problems ug tungod ani makita nga unequal jud ang distribution sa benefits sa globalization. Ang uban makapahimulos pero daghan pud ang nagpabilin sa kalisod. Rinata sa Latin American experience argues that democratic stability requires policies that limit the society's degree of substantive economic and social inequality. So for a country to have democratic stability, meaning peace, fairness, and trust in government, there must be a policies or laws nga mo-reduce sa big gaps between the rich and the poor. Kay kung mosamot kadako ang gap sa rich and sa poor, social unrest jud ang resulta, magkaguliyang jud. Struggle that influence Latin American economies and governments. This can add to the Latin American experience. New nations went to war with each other to settle where their new boundaries were. There were also conflicts between the Catholic Church power and Latin America. ang economy sa government sa Latin America nakasinati og daghang internal struggles gikan sa pag-establish sa independence og borders hangtod sa influence sa Catholic Church. Kini ang mga internal issues nag-interact sa globalization mao nga mas lisod ang ilang dalan padulong sa full development sa ilahang country. And aside sa struggles or experiences, Latin America has economic issues. Una na ani ang slow economic growth tungod kay kulang sila sa competitiveness o productivity. Sunod ang poor quality sa education ug ang slow transfer of knowledge and innovation nagpa-delay sa development o grabe ang inequality o kulang ang social protection nga nagpagrabe sa social division and naglimit sa opportunities para sa kadaghanan. Okay, so to conclude, ang mga experiences sa Latin America sa globalization kay komplikado pero transformative siya. Yes, naghatag kini og kanang economic growth o bag-ong market opportunities pero gipaabot pod niya ang mga problema just like sa inequality, infrastructural shortages o struggle sa democratic stability. From their experiences, nakamake og bag-ong pananaw or vision ang Latin American countries usa ka mas patas o inclusive ng global framework nga nakabase sa solidarity, sustainable development o respeto sa national sovereignty. Kini nga vision dili lang puro economic integration, pero nag-focus sa human well-being, environment ug fair power relations sa tibuok kalibutan. Ang goal ani kay mao ang partnership over competition and local needs before global demands para tinuod nga magtinabangay ang mga nasud sa paglambo.
So, good morning everyone. I'm Cristiano and I am the reporter for today. So first, we will be discussing about the world of regions and global division. So first, let's break that two and explain to you what are those. So first is world of regions. So this perspective looks at the world by dividing into different regions based on the characteristics like geography, culture, economics, or politics. For example, you may have regions like Latin America, Southeast Asia, and our Middle East. So since we are here from the Philippines, so we are considered as Southeast Asia. So that's good. It depends on the geography that you are in. So ang world of region kuno, this perspective, the world divided world into area based on things they are have in common. So these things can be geography like mountains or rivers, culture like language or religions, economics, so like how rich or poor they are. So or politics like what kind of government they have. Examples, region include Latin America and Southeast Asia or Middle East Asia. That's why. So in world of region, mag-depends siya on how your geography depend on or where you are came from it. So like you are from the Latin America or Southeast Asia and Middle East. So it depends if ahaka dira na belong. Next is the global division. So this refers to how the world is divided based on certain global scale factor. A common one is the division between the global north and the global south. So that the global north and the global south will be discussed to the next reporter. And the global divisions look how the world is split up based on the big global factors. A common division is between the global north, richer developed countries, mga sila mga datu na mga countries, and unlike sa global south is mga sila ang pinaka-pobre or might say poorer developing countries. So, ang pasabot kada is the global north is mga sila mga country na nag-develop pa, like, unlike sa global division is like dapat sila like, develop or advance na kailang country. So basically, the world of region is about grouping countries by shared traits, while global division is about looking at the world in terms of big global differences like wealth, depende siya sa imong status. That's all.
Good day, everyone. I am Marianne Custodio, and today I'll be talking about the North and the South, focusing on Latin America. Have you ever wondered why some countries are richer and more advanced, while others are still catching up? Kamo ba? Nakathink mo, anak? So, why is there such a big difference between nations? Well, that's what we'll explore today. How the world is divided into the global north and the global south, and where Latin America fits in. The world is often divided into two main parts, which is the global north and the global south. The global north includes developed countries like the United States, Canada, and most of Europe. So these are rich and technologically advanced nations. So on the other hand, the global south includes developing countries found mostly in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So these countries are still growing and trying to catch up in terms of economy and development. So kuan ra ni siya guys, like mura ba ni siya group chat, or ang uban is active, ang uban is silent ra, like pataw-taw lang nana. So the active ones are like the north, leading in technology and trade, while the quiet ones is kanang the south, which is kanang still working hard to be heard, nana. So this shows the big gap between rich and poor nations, a gap we call global inequality. Now, let's focus on Latin America. It's part of the global south and includes countries like Brazil, Mexico, Peru, and Argentina. So, can you imagine how rich this region is in culture, music, and traditions? Okay, kuan man siya guys, like daghan kay silang kultura ba, inana. So parehas nato nga daghan sab kaugalingon nga tradition. From colorful festivals to delicious food, Latin America is full of life jud nana. So but despite this richness, many countries in Latin America face challenges like poverty, corruption, and inequality. So even if they have great natural resources and talented people, they still struggle to compete with the stronger countries in the north. Now, let's talk about the relationship between the North and the South. So, this relationship is often unequal. The North controls most of the world's trade, industries, and technology. So, meanwhile, the South include Latin America, often depends on the North products and investments. So, mura pag ka ng group project, ang isa kay permi nagalid, ang uban kay kanang mo-follow lang, nana. Sometimes, the North decides what happens in the global economy and the South just adjust. So, however, Latin America countries today are becoming more aware of this situation. They're trying to be more independent, producing their own goods, improving education, and building partnership with other southern nations. So, in short, they don't just want to follow, they want to lead too. So, the big question is, can Latin America rise above these challenges? So, ako is yes, I believe they can. Ikaw, unsay mong tan-aw? So, right now, many Latin American nations are working together to make their economies stronger. They focus on cooperation, fair trade, and sustainable development. So, for example, they join regional groups that help each other grow instead of relying only on the North. So, they also invest in education and kanang technology because that's the key to progress, man. So, their dream is to create a world where the South can stand equal with the North, not just depend on it. To summarize everything, the North-South divide shows us how unequal the world can be. The global North is rich and powerful, while the global South, like Latin America, continues to fight for fairness and opportunity. But what's inspiring is that Latin America never give up. They continue to rise, to innovate, and to unite. So, what can we learn from them? That progress takes teamwork, unity, and determination. In short, kung magkahiusa ta, mas dali ang kalambuan. Tama ba? Yes, tama. No matter how big the gap is, if nations help one another, the world can become fairer and more balanced for everyone. So that's all. Thank you.